Hello there, XR. Can you hear me? Hello there. So, I recently created some projects in Blender, and I'm gonna do some detailed breakdown of them and some tips you can do for vegetation and textures. So we have this one, and I will show you some others. So not this one right now. Like this one I did yesterday, and I do have some more. Like this one, and this one you can see it's an image right now, but I actually rendered it in separate file and use shaders to make it look like this. Hello everyone, I hope you are all doing great. Let's start the video. First we will start with the basic one. So many people ask me how I actually did this one. So we will start with some basic. Let me grab them and our sun. So you can see this over here, it's just a mess, and I'm using geometry node for it. Ignore upper part, this is nothing, just focus on this one. So as you can see in this geometry part, there is some aspect like we are using this isosphere perimetric mass to transfer normals. If I disable it, you won't see any difference because it's actually working with shader nodes. I can actually remove this one as well. So I'm not actually changing the mesh, I'm just capturing some attribute, like I'm using isosphere, I'm transferring mesh into geometry and naming it UV map. Actually I don't need this one. If you see over here, I'm using this geometry, capturing attribute as shading, and using the sun to change the direction of shader. It's not actually affected by sun strength, it's actually affected by sun direction, their position, normal, and I'm using it in shader editor. So I'm just reading the comment. I do have some audience from the other countries, so I prefer to speak in English. I don't mind speaking in Hindi because that's what I speak usually, but I hope you understand the reason. So if you look at that, the shading attribute, this one, I'm using it over here, and there is one more which is sun rotation. I'm named this sun rotation, and over there, keep in mind that this bush over here is not actually mine. I got it from a friend and I don't remember who gave me. It's from some other artist and I just reconstructed it. So if you know who made this, actually please name this in comment, because I don't want to steal someone's effort. So this is how actually working, just dot protecting the rotation of sun and the attributes you are getting. Like if you say the shading one, it's just actually a normal data from the isosphere, and this one is actually rotation. It's not will work on it because this is a vector data, and it will show me how the vector is rotating. And when we dot product them both all, we got this, which is simply a gradient. We can also do that without gradient node, so keep that in mind. It's just some process. You can keep that with geometry nodes or elsewhere with some basic things. So after getting gradient, you can just use some basic colors, which I picked from this image. You can see is from the movie Your Name. I think most of the people here have watched the movie, and I cropped it so I don't have to put all the effort to make a huge scene, just a little one. So you can see I just picked the color over here, and we are working with that one. So I just duplicated this, and for the that one which is behind it is the same with a lighter color, and I just use the particle system to do that. Now the main thing is the textures over here, which is I got lots of comments of how I did this, which if you saw that it just some it's highly subdivided because I thought I will use the displacement, but it's not actually matter. It can be just a plane or something, and it will work just like that. Let me see to shade editor, and you can see I have some several groups. So this one is actually just a PBR texture. You can see it's just a PBR texture which has ambient occlusion, color, I think that doesn't have roughness, and normals, which I am using the normals so I can get some this kind of highlights. You can see here, and I am using this diffuse shader setup for cell shading. And this one is the main thing here because it contains some complex things. Let me cover this for you. So if I just do that, you can see it's here, and I have a other version of it which I also use for the lighter version, and using this as a mask to show the shadow area and a highlighted area. So how I did this, if I ungroup that one, so it's some Voronoi texture, which I am just using noise texture to mix something up, and using the colors. If you want to do that much, I saw that on Twitter on someone's post. If I press E on the color ramp and just drag it like that, you can get that much of handles. And you can see I'm using other shader setups to do that, and mixing it with the actual shader PBR setup which we saw before. And till this one it's not that complicated, but this thing you can see this has 3 colors over here. It's kind of needed some geometry because you have to actually paint it with separate colors. So it makes my process a bit easier because I just have to paint it like, let me show you. So this is a cube which is I have to subdivide it multiple times. So I'm going to vertex paint it. You can see there is an attribute, color attribute. So I will rename it as a color for now, and I will just choose a color, pure color like red. It's not showing red, and I can also choose something else like green. So when I go to shader and just add an attribute node, I can copy that color to here and it will appear on the shaders. But why? Because I choose two different color for it, red and blue, I can use a separate color node which only will show the red color or green color. So with this setup you can see I'm using it as a mask, and the all color here I will choose from this node. So I'm using mix RGB and using them as a mask, so I can just paint it over here. And using the normal of this texture to get it more some personality over rock. You can see the shadows now because of this color ramp, and I also do the highlights. You can see with the just a normal, because normal contains many values in terms of light and shadows. I did the shadow version because I know with that thing there will be shadow like this and highlight over here. So I multiplied the shadow with the texture and added the highlights and multiplied the texture color. And in this one, this is a shadow version, because if you see the whole shader, there is a light version and there is a shadow version. Because I could have just multiplied the shadows with like just multiplied this shader to it directly, but it will just black out the texture, which I don't want. I want it to be a something like this tone, which is like this one. So I did that, and most of the thing are go the same. There is not that much of a specific thing about that. Same for this shader, and for the outline you can see there is a specific outline with just some noise texture which I use with alpha S. So it can give us something like this if you look at here. So I tried to get something like this, which is fine I guess, but I hope it will get better in the future, which is Blender 4.2 is not doing anything for that. So now we can jump into the next file. So because we did that one, I will go to the sandwich scene I created a while ago. So if you just saw that one, I will just show you on the Twitter. Where is it? That one. You can see I use the same background. Over here with that cel-shaded character, and of course I did with that reference. So if I just go to the environment one, you can see it's the same setup with a different placement. And there is a difference between that, because the file I saw you before, there is no such a painting like effect. I mean that look good, but I wanted something different from that specific image, so I did that effect. So how you do that? So first of all, the bushes are the same, there is no such a difference between them. But if I go to the compositor, let me just press F12 for to render it. I think because of the streaming, it's taking some sweet time to do that. We have to wait a little. I didn't expect to crash. Let's do that again. Let me just render that layer. This is the environment one. Render it. So the environment is rendered. You can see here. So this is the what usually render. But if you go here in the passes menu, view layer, I enable it's the character one. If I go to environment layer, here is the shadow path and ambient occlusion part and cryptomat object path. If you see here, I use Kawara node to make it look like a little posterized. But if you see here, the only affected area is bushes. This is happened because I use AO node with the color amp and shadow path and using Kawahara on them too to make them stylized and darken their shader. And with the cryptomat node, I just mask out the area I want to affect and just mask it. You can see now the area here is the same as the render, but the bushes are now a little stylized with the shadows and ambient occlusion. So I personally like this scene, and we are going to do a little more on, like, see if we can do the kitchen one. Could not find that one. Let's do that later. Let's see the bottle one. So I just recently did this. It's really new. I copied it from your name. I mean the use is a reference. So as you can see, this image over here, I actually explained it how I did it. I will do it again. It's actually a 3D scene. I rendered it another layer. Let me show you the BG one. So this one, it's the same image. I just show you, just render it. So just render it. If I go to compositor now, you can see it's how it appeared. Just a simple render first, then I use Kawara on 8 setting, default is 6, I am using 8, and I use the filter node, this one, and change it to the shadows on 0.2 to make it a bit sharper. Then I'd use soften to make it a little softer and blurred it a bit, and then I saved the image on desktop. So when I save this image on desktop, it should be over here. So this one over here, this is a little more blurred because I just use a photo editor to make it a little more blur, and then I imported it on our scene. here. So if you just see the image, this is what the image looks like. Then I use the hue saturation node to make it a little more vibrant and change in color, like it's just stopped raining or something. And I use a gradient because sunlight is coming from here, as you can see from the hand. So I just added it on the shader, which give it a little more depth. And I actually use the gradient to make it a little more darker on the bottom and a little here. And after that I just use a color ramp on the image itself to get these shadows. I mean, if you saw the image, there is already the darker spots, and when I use the color ramp, I just get these darker spots and multiply it, which will give me this result, which looks super good. And I just added some these spots with the noise texture on Voronoi texture to get this sparkling look. I try to replicate from the reference, which convert this simple image to that thing, which looks super impressive. Just how much we can just convert one image to a surprising looking good shader. So now we are done with that background scene. I'm going to break down the how you can did the hand specifically. So as you can see, I am getting some good outlines over here. So first let's just break the geometry for to understand what is going on here. So if you just saw the hand, you can see the geometry. It's a fine geometry, but I just did some beveling over the creases to get this thing. And because I marked them as a freestyle edges, if you can see that yellow lines here, I just go like this. I select this one, go to edges, mark as freestyle edges. When you do that, most people know that in the freestyle edges, when you do the outline, these yellow lines become the outlines, but not many people know this also work in grease pencils. I mean, if you look at the modifier, there is edge types and edge marks. It's also refers, you can see the effects in real time, the yellow lines becoming the outline here. So people should know that, because it's, I mean, if you look at this here edge, it's just marked as freestyle edges, and we could not supposedly know it also work with grease pencil. So it's just a tip. I think many people should know that who read NPR. So just remove this one, clear freestyle edges. So there is one more trick I want to show you. So if you, I think I just didn't get the sun. If you see here, I am using two suns, one is here and one is from different direction. So if I show you the color of the suns, one is green and one is red. So why I do this? Because when you do that, like, what you simply do is use the color ramp, make it look like this. But because I have two suns, it's just combining it to get the white color, which is kind of broken. Diffuse shader to RGB color ramp, which is not what I like to do here. Like if you just see the default shader, it's red and green, and when I use the green color, the red is a little dim, so it's happening like this. But I wanted to control this effect and this effect separately, so I just used two different color of sun and use the separate color node like this one. Now I'm just seeing the red color, I'm not seeing the green sun like this. This one is not actually working on this object anymore because I'm just using the red portion of color, and I can use it separate. If I duplicate that and use the green color, now I can use the green color separately. So I'm doing the same here. I'm just adding the color amp and getting two different highlights on object. Okay, I will try to get more deep into the texture. So let's continue. I'm just using this, like I'm just controlling the green sun highlights. Now if I want to do that, I'm just controlling the red sun highlights. And if you see that thing, I just use a vertex color to hide some imperfections. I could have also used a grease pencil, but it's fine to use that. And the thing is that bottle shader was specifically very hard to do because of how confusingly Blender's alpha blends modes work. I had to do several attempts to make that. So I will do that a separate video for the bottle shader, but for some object you can see the alpha blend is very noisy because I wanted it to do that. I use the noise texture to make it some like this. And this one is grease pencil, this you can see on the bottle, because I don't want it to mess with the shader anymore, so I just use the grease pencil. And this bubble, let me undo some. So this bubble over here, which you can see it's kinda reacting like bottle is squeezing by some hands. So it will create an illusion like bottle is filling with water, which is actually not the case, because it's much easier to do that way. Yeah, this will be available online after the ending of the video. So after that you can see it's giving an illusion the bottle is filled with water, which is much more easier compared to the actually filling it with water, which is actually hard to control when you have these settings. I know Blender 4.2 I also give the ray tracing too, but I'm using the 4.0 version because I think this is more stable right now, and I like this one over here. I don't like the Blender 4.2 setting much, so I will prefer to use this one. If you want to do this kind of shading stuff, don't jump to the next version that much quickly because your add-ons will break. So let's see, if I want to do some outline stick, I will tell you. So if just use, let me show you the hand rig first. So this is a hand, you can see. If I disable all of the shape keys, you will see this. So this is what it looks like without the shape keys. Kinda messed up and very weird and ugly in my opinion, but as I use the shape keys, you can see it will improve one shape key after another. You can see how much difference it makes to use shape keys in your workflow. And you can see one here is actually animated. If I select the hand, you can see it actually animated. It's actually animated because if I just show you that one, I actually show you, you can see it's squeezing here. which make it look like it's actual 2D, because 3D objects have that specific problem. When you do the rig, if you didn't rig that specifically to move the muscle or skin of your hand, it look like a solid hard object, which I do not want it to be like this, because I saw many Reddit comment on my previous post to make it look like squeezing like that. So I made a specific shape keys which will make it look like squeeze. First you can see it's squeezing a little and then it rotates, and there is some sparkle as well, just with emission shader, nothing more. And I also using only 8 fps and 9 frames. So this is specifically, you can see it's amazing how 8 fps can really look good. So we will jump into the next one because we are getting the shader fps. I will go deep in the grease pencil today. So if I just, not that one, not that one. So if you see that file, this one actually have 22 frames with 8 fps as well. You have to see, I think the grease pencil over here is using too much pixelated effect. That will be fine. So if you see that one over here, you can see, man, it's look very simple, but if you rotate the video, I mean that file, you can see that file is matched up. You can see even a different arm, because I know that hand won't reach like this, so I have to use a different arm. And this is also animated frame by frame. It's not Bezier, it's on constant interpolation. And I also using different shader for water. But if I disable the line art over here, you can see it's much flatter now, because I use line art for many things, like for bottle, which are some automated hand outline. Some I draw manually, like this blue one and black ones, and this one as well. And if I disable the bottle, I have some on clothes. Clothes are actually automatic, I didn't do any manual work on them. And some on the faces, like hair, this reflection, this shadows, and this glow effect. I also improved this shading, you can see, added some more facial depths, and this effect with the grease pencil I drew by my hand with the mouse. Actually did not use the pen tab, and I also use multiple shape keys on them. You can see there are many of them. If I disable this, you can see it's actually like, let me disable the line art first. It's actually like this. So you have to use the multiple shape keys to enhance your objects for that kind of scene, because you are actually representing the 2D by 3D, but that does not make you concerned about how it made, because if it look good, that all it's matter. You don't even have to use the same object in other scene. You can just use the default one. Like for these hands, I'm just using this model. Ever since I created hand video, I always do this one. It's not because they are very good or something, I mean there actually is, but they're much easier to use. They have fine geometry to work with, and I can use multiple save keys, and I can delete whatever I want, and this rig will interact with it. So I always use this one, but I do have to use multiple things to make it perfect. Like The save keys I did in hands one won't be here. I have to use different one to make it much good, much better. And you can also see the eyes actually open, but it doesn't look like this because it is just cell shader. It's a pure colors, there is no depth on it, so you can take advantage of that kind of thing. Let's go deep into some texturing. I should have that one. I could not find that. Let's go much deeper in the outline section. So if you see that one, I created this a while ago. Let the shader load in. It's not rigged right now, it will be soon. So if you see here, it has some nice geometry on it. And if I use the line art, it will slow a little, but you can see it look much better without line arts. It actually look good because there are several collections, like I am using different line arts from different parts of body. Like I use different for body, different for face, and different for hair. It's actually pretty reliable, so you don't have to worry about intersecting each other one like that. You can just mark the freestyle edges. Like if I mark this one, it will just be there now, which make it pretty handy to use more than freestyle, because freestyle does give you more options. But grease pencil, because it works in real time, you don't have to render it every time to view how it works. And be mindful of that. You should not use it in very heavy scene because it will crash your PC for sure, because it take too much load. If you see on my mouse, what happened to, if you see that one, it's actually taking a much load because I'm using subdivision on many of the objects to make it look smooth, but it actually feels good. And these are not actual eyes, this is a shader. You can see this is just a shader. Which is great to use in the something like this. It's actually work great and make an illusion for that. Now jump on the other files. Which one is this? Not that one. I do want to showcase, but I could not find the file right now. But I just wanted to showcase that files over here. I created this in full 3D. I used this reference. I don't know. I get it. I think from Bilibili. I guess you can see there is a logo. I don't know how to read that. So if you know the artist, you know that. I don't know. So I created this scene in full 3D. So there is some tip you can use, like if you saw that reflection, I will show you how to do that. Just a second. if you use a rounded object, create a shader with layer weights, you can create a ring like that. It's actually work on better on cylinder actually. Let's see. So you can create something like that, and when you use geometry, say geometry node and vector math node, and do this, you can actually shift it somewhat. It's not perfect, but it actually give you some control over it. And that's how I created this shadow over here, and same as this one. Onto the floor one, let me show you the floor a second. Here if you see in that floor, you can see some reflections. It's actually some fake reflection, as you may get. So to do that, you can just get a plane and use like noise texture like I used on that one, and add color ramp. Stretch it a lot, make it 0 or something to make it some lines like this. And if you change it to the window, it will react with this area, this whole panel right here, which can be used as a camera, you can see. So it look like some reflections, which give you some nice control over here. It actually look like reflections, and if you just add it to your shader, it will give you some really nice effects. You don't have to worry about lights and anything, it just looks good on that. Let's see if I can. You can also pose the questions. I will try to cover the whole texture thing. Let's cover some texture. If I can get a reference in my reference one. Let's see if I can get some reference. I don't know, there is not much of a texture, most likely cell shader. There is texture, but it will take some light effects. Don't actually have a good reference right now to show how texture can be, but most of the time you will use the PBR. If I just go back to stairs one, it will just take some practice. Most of the time you will took the knowledge from the internet, mostly YouTube, because that's a way more easier to get the tutorials on Blender. But this texture thing is kinda hard to learn because there's not much information about it. Shader editor. We're not shading. Like if you saw that shader over here, the road one, I mean it's not actually a road, but you can see I try to replicate the texture. I think I get pretty close with it. So there should be another PBR shader. You can see it's a PBR with base color, roughness, normal. I did make it a group so I can save some space over there, or it will look ugly most of the time. I just worried if I have to delete or something or not because of it, but this thing saved me a lot of time. With that kind of technique, look, you can see I try to replicate this shader, And if you see that one, this is actually, what was that, it's actually roughness. I'm using roughness to get this effect, which is kind of very similar to that one, because the shader we are using is give me more give exact pattern like this reference, and with the color ramp I can extract that pattern with that. And I think that one is normal can give you some good highlights and shadows. You just to add it actually, and you have to actually add color to yourself, because the texture you will use in this shading is actually the pattern itself, not the texture. You will just look for the pattern. If it matches like this, you can see these things are totally different in color. I just noticed the pattern and I think it will work. Then I added the colors with the color ramp. You can just use the A or pick the color manually. I prefer to or recommend to pick the color manually, or it will just go many dense and hard to control. Mix the color. I use, you can see there is two different color ramps with the same noise texture, because one is for the main color and one is for the shadow. If I mix them, I'm using this pattern as a mask in the factor, so it will give me something like this. And because I already saw you normals one and highlight one, it actually give me some depth to me. And I actually also using the displacement one with some geometry with UV coordinates. Actually you can see if it's local it will be randomized if I use the UV. And actually in that one you can see I'm also using the UV coordinates. So if I scale the UV, you can see pattern itself is scaling in both geometry one and this one. And so gone, we have this, and I didn't remember why I did that. And actually I think it's for the shadow purpose. I created a, you can see there is a blue version which is actually for the shadow. I'm just using color tone for that. You can see in the shadow area it goes blue. And I also using ambient occlusion to multiply it. Most of the time you will do the same effort. You will get some difficulties because the pattern itself, the color is not that much hard to do till you are really going for the most painterly effect like this one, because it's really hard to do that geometry, or neither I was able to get the same pattern from the texture. I had to do the manually with cell fracture and join it together and sculpt it a little. I didn't get the desired result I was hoping for, but I get something I can just work with. The most disappointing thing was that, and this thing I was trying to get something like this, but didn't get actually like this. But it was workable and actually look beautiful, because you can get somewhere with that. But when you use the shadows and ambient occlusion mask, let me show you. If I click here and choose the ambient occlusion, you can see this is the ambient occlusion mask. It will only appear if you enable this, and there is shadow mask, which is also controlled by this shadow option. If you go by default, this is what happened, which will give you some more soft shadows, but kind of broken. I will prefer to go with the high setting because it looks much better. There is also bloom one, which is fine, but I don't use it anymore. There is mist, which I prefer, look beautiful but usable many times, but not on this one. Let's see if I don't know if I can render it right now. I don't want it to be crashed. So if you saw over here in the render, there is the base render, and there is some passes like this one is the shadow which I saw you before. This one is ambient occlusion. In ambient occlusion, you can see I'm using this color amp, which is not doing anything. I thought you can just remove it if you don't do anything. And I'm multiplying. I'm using this CryptoMate node to make a mask, so I can use it like this and only use on this specific object, not on the grasses. You can see if I miss this now, I'm just getting ambient occlusion on stairs and on solid objects, not on the vegetation. If you use the shaders, you can see it's giving me some nice gradient over everything. I just masked the whole area with that CryptoMate node on the grasses one and multiplied to get some good nice gradient, and that's how I get some nice detail. I also prefer to use the Photoshop. If you don't like the Photoshop, you can just use this counterpart. I will just take a snapshot of that, paste it, and add a layer of vibrance. If you increase the vibrance, you can see the color are getting more saturated, but not in a bad way. I prefer to do that after every render. It look good. I can also use the color balance. You can do as your liking, and you can also use the vignette node or something to do that, because I edited that in Premiere Pro last time, so that's the thing I did that. Where is that? You can see I saw the main render, which I also increased the blacks in Premiere Pro, which will just enhance the shadows. So there's a solid, there's ambient occlusion, there's a shadows, and I just combine it together to look like this. So that's most of the part of that. And I also created some other scenes. There is the old one. I also created that one before. I didn't post it on YouTube because I didn't have that time. I did this full in 3D, just the mouth is 2D right there. It was really hard to do that. Let's see what we have here. I already and if you want any of these files, you can just go to my Patreon page. You can get all the files here, like this one. You can download any file you want from my collection. They are always available, and you can also question me in Discord. So that's the end of the stream today. If you have any question, you can also ask in Discord. I will try to cooperate with you and answer your question. I hope this helped you a lot. So we will meet in the next tutorial.